The discovery. The planet was quiet. Too quiet for a place that looked so alive. The forest stretched for miles, with trees taller than towers and glowing plants that lit the ground with strange colors. Shadows moved under the leaves as if the forest itself was watching. The human explorer, Daniel, adjusted the straps on his pack and walked slowly, trying not to make too much noise. His boots crunched softly on the glowing moss, leaving a faint trail behind. Daniel had landed here only 2 days ago. His mission was simple: scan the area, collect samples, and leave. But something about this planet was different. The air was heavy, filled with whispers he couldn't explain. At night, the sky opened to rivers of light, long streams of stars and colors he had never seen before. It was beautiful, but also unsettling. That night, as he crossed a ridge, he heard it. A sound that froze him in place. It was faint at first. A soft cry carried by the wind, not an animal, not a machine, a child. Daniel's heart skipped. No human settlements existed here. His ship's records were clear. The planet was uncharted. So how could a child be crying in the dark? He tightened his grip on his flashlight and followed the sound. Each step pulled him deeper into the forest where the trees bent low, their branches curling like claws. The cry grew louder. It was filled with fear, but also something else: loneliness. When Daniel reached a clearing, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, sitting against the roots of a massive glowing tree, was a small figure. At first he thought it was human. 2 arms, 2 legs, small body. But as the figure turned its head, Daniel's breath caught. The child's skin shimmered faint silver, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Its eyes were large, too large, shining like liquid glass. Its hair looked more like soft tendrils of light than real strands. And it was shaking, tiny hands gripping its knees. Daniel lowered his flashlight, not wanting to scare it. "Hey," he whispered, his voice gentle. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The child flinched at the sound of his voice. It didn't understand his words, but fear looked the same in every species, and Daniel could see it clear as day. He slowly crouched down, keeping his hands open to show he had no weapon. The child blinked, studying him. For a long moment, neither moved. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Then a sound echoed from the trees. Low, heavy. Something large was moving. The child's eyes widened, and it let out a sharp cry, pressing itself tighter against the tree. Daniel's instincts flared. He turned, scanning the dark, his hand reaching for the small plasma cutter at his belt. The growl came again, deep, rumbling, and close. He caught movement between the trees, tall shapes gliding just beyond the light. Predators. The child whimpered. Daniel looked back and saw it trembling, helpless with no one else to protect it. His chest tightened. He had no idea who this child was, no idea if helping it would get him killed. But leaving it here, that wasn't an option. He stepped closer and reached out a hand. "Come on," he said firmly, even though the child couldn't understand him. "We need to move." The child hesitated. Its glassy eyes flicked between him and the dark shapes. Then slowly it reached out a small glowing hand and touched his. The skin was warm, almost too warm, like holding a spark. Daniel lifted the child carefully into his arms. It was lighter than he expected, almost weightless, but it clung to him tightly, small fingers gripping his jacket. The growl behind him grew louder. Leaves shook as something massive stepped closer. Daniel didn't wait to see what it was. He ran. Branches whipped against his arms as he sprinted through the glowing forest. The child buried its face against his chest, its faint light guiding the way like a beacon. Behind them, heavy footsteps crashed through the trees, chasing, hunting. Daniel's lungs burned, but he pushed harder. He couldn't let the thing catch them. He didn't know why he cared so much for this strange child, but in that moment it didn't matter. Protecting it was the only thing that mattered. Finally, he spotted a narrow crack in a rock wall ahead. a small cave just big enough. He ducked inside, sliding down the stone floor as the sound of pursuit thundered behind him. The creature roared, terrible, bone-shaking sound, but it didn't follow them into the cave. For a long time, Daniel sat in the dark, chest heaving, holding the child close. The forest outside went quiet again. Only the faint glow of the child's skin lit the cave walls, casting strange shadows. The child looked up at him, its eyes wide but calmer now. Slowly, it lifted a hand and touched his face. It was a simple gesture, but Daniel felt the meaning. Gratitude. Trust. He sighed, leaning his head back against the stone. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered. Outside, the alien forest whispered. But inside the cave, for the first time, Daniel felt something different. The start of a bond. A connection with a being from a world far from his own. What? He didn't know. What he couldn't know was that this was not just a rescue. This was the beginning of a test. And the eyes of the village were already watching. The journey begins. The forest slept uneasy that night. From the mouth of the cave, Daniel could see the trees swaying even though no wind blew. The faint blue glow of the plants pulsed like a heartbeat, as if the entire world was alive and watching. The child slept against his arm, warm and small, its faint silver glow lighting the walls. Every so often, the child twitched as if dreaming. Daniel could not sleep. His mind kept replaying the sound of the beast outside, the deep growl that had followed them through the woods. Something about it bothered him. It had chased, but it hadn't entered the cave. Almost as if the cave itself was sacred ground, a place even predators feared. He didn't know if that was good news or bad. When the first strands of alien sunlight touched the forest, Daniel knew he couldn't stay there. He had to move. The child woke quietly, blinking up at him with those glassy, oversized eyes. No words passed between them, but the child seemed to know. It pointed a small, glowing hand toward the forest, a direction, a path. Daniel frowned. "You want me to take you home, don't you?" The child didn't understand his words, but it nodded all the same. He sighed, adjusting his pack. "All right, kid. Let's try not to get eaten." They left, the safety of the cave. The forest greeted them with whispers and flickers of light. Strange insects buzzed in the air, their wings leaving trails of fire like shooting stars. The trees groaned as if they were alive, bending as Daniel walked past, almost guiding or warning him. At first, the path seemed easy. The child led, the way with sure steps, as if it knew the forest. But soon Daniel realized this was no ordinary forest. The ground itself seemed to test him. Roots twisted across the soil like snakes, tripping his feet. Streams of glowing water cut through the path, their liquid red like molten fire. When he dipped the tip of a stick into the stream, the wood hissed and turned black instantly. Acid. He lifted the child onto his shoulders before crossing. Each step was careful, balancing on rocks that seemed ready to crumble. His boots slipped more than once, and the red water sizzled as drops splashed nearby. The child clung tightly to his head, silent but alert. When they made it across, Daniel's chest burned from the effort. He dropped to one knee, breathing hard. The child leaned down from his shoulders, its tiny hand patting his hair in a strange, comforting gesture. Daniel gave a short laugh. Thanks for the encouragement. But the forest was not done testing him. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Vines moved on their own, curling around branches like serpents. Once, a vine shot out toward Daniel's leg, wrapping tight. He nearly fell before slashing it with his plasma cutter. The vine screamed, not hissed, not cracked, screamed, like a living thing in pain. The sound echoed through the forest, and that was when the whispers began. At first, Daniel thought it was the wind again, but then he realized it was voices, soft alien voices whispering from the shadows, words he didn't understand. The child stiffened and looked around, its wide eyes reflecting the faint light. Daniel froze. "Who's there?" he called, even though he knew no answer would come. The whispers grew louder. Then, just as suddenly, silence. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. The forest went dead still. Daniel's heart pounded. He forced himself to keep walking, every muscle in his body tense. The child held onto him tighter, its glowing skin flickering faintly like a nervous heartbeat. Hours passed. The forest seemed endless, every direction looking the same. Yet the child never wavered. It would stop, look at the ground, then point ahead as if following signs only it could see. Daniel trusted it because he had no other choice. But the forest was not done. As they crossed into a wide clearing, Daniel stopped cold. Ahead, the ground was covered with bones. Not human bones. Alien. Large, small, twisted, broken. The remains of creatures scattered everywhere, glowing faintly in the strange light. The child whimpered softly, clinging to his leg. Daniel crouched, studying one of the bones. Deep claw marks ran across it, fresh and sharp. Something big had killed here, recently. Roar split the air. Daniel's head snapped up. At the edge of the clearing, a shadow moved. Taller than any tree, wide as a ship's wing, its eyes burning like fire. The same beast from the night before. The child screamed and buried its face in Daniel's leg. Daniel gritted his teeth, plasma, cutter in hand. He knew he couldn't fight something that size, not with one small tool. His only chance was to run, but there was no cover, no trees nearby, only the field of bones. The beast stepped forward, each movement shaking the ground. Its mouth opened, rows of jagged teeth glowing faintly. Daniel grabbed the child and bolted across the clearing. Bones crunched under his boots, sharp edges cutting into his legs. Behind him, the beast roared again, its breath hot and foul. A shadow swept over him as it lunged. He dove forward, clutching the child tight, rolling across the bones just as massive jaws snapped where he had been. The ground split beneath them, a hidden pit yawning open. Daniel barely stopped in time, the child, clinging to his chest. He peered down. Sharp crystal spikes lined the bottom, glowing with deadly light. One wrong step and they'd be impaled. The beast roared from behind, closing in. Daniel's mind raced. There had to be a way out. The child squirmed in his arms and suddenly pointed to the left. There, half hidden behind a wall of bones, was a narrow tunnel glowing faint blue. Daniel didn't think twice. He sprinted, leaping over broken skeletons, diving into the tunnel just as the beast's claw slashed down. The impact shook the walls, raining dust and bones over them. Inside the tunnel it was narrow, barely wide enough for him to crawl. The child led the way, its glow faint but steady. Behind them, the beast roared in rage, its claw scraping against the stone, unable to follow. Daniel's heart pounded, his body shaking with adrenaline. Every nerve screamed at him to stop, but he kept crawling, the sound of the beast fading behind him. Finally, they emerged into a hidden glade. The trees here were taller, glowing gold instead of blue. The air was calm, almost sacred. The child smiled faintly for the first time and pointed ahead. There in the distance, Daniel saw lights. Not the glow of plants. Not the shimmer of the forest. Real lights. Structures. A village. For the first time, he realized, he wasn't just leading the child home. He was walking straight into the heart of an alien world, and someone, or something, already knew he was coming. Alien trials. The forest gave way to silence as Daniel stepped into the golden glade. The air felt different here, thicker, heavier, almost like the weight of invisible eyes pressing against his back. The child walked beside him now, not afraid, not trembling, but strangely calm, almost as if it knew what was waiting. Daniel's boots sank softly into the glowing moss as he stared ahead. The village lights flickered in the distance, but the path was no straight walk. Between him and the village stretched a valley filled with twisting shapes, pillars of stone that looked carved too perfect to be natural. Each one was covered in strange markings that glowed faintly, pulsing like veins. Daniel slowed. His instincts screamed at him. This wasn't just part of the forest. This was designed. The child tugged at his arm, urging him forward. They entered the valley. The first steps seemed harmless. The silence was complete, broken only by the crunch of his boots. But then the air shifted. A low hum vibrated through the stones, a sound that seemed to crawl into Daniel's bones. His chest tightened. The markings on the stones brightened, filling the valley with eerie blue light. Then it began. A sudden wall of fire erupted behind them, silent blue flames rising high into the sky. Daniel spun around, shielding the child. The fire didn't burn the ground, didn't spread, it just stood there like a barrier, cutting off their escape. Daniel's throat went dry. This wasn't nature. This was deliberate. The child grabbed his hand and pulled him forward again. Its glassy eyes glowed, reflecting the strange flames. Daniel tightened his grip on the plasma cutter, though he doubted it would help. The first trial revealed itself in seconds. Ahead, the path split into 3 narrow bridges, each stretched across a deep chasm. At the bottom of the chasm, sharp, crystal spikes glimmered like teeth. The bridges looked identical, thin, unstable, swaying slightly. But Daniel knew better. Something was wrong. The child pointed to the middle bridge, but Daniel hesitated. He tested the first with a rock. The stone bounced once, then the entire bridge dissolved into dust, falling into the abyss. Daniel froze. The second bridge shimmered faintly, as if made of glass. The middle bridge looked plain, simple, almost too normal. He swallowed hard. Middle, it is. He stepped carefully onto the bridge, the child clinging to his chest. The planks creaked but held. Each step felt like walking on the edge of death. He kept his eyes forward, refusing to look down. Halfway across, the whispers returned. Soft voices circling him like snakes. He turned his head but saw no one. The voices grew louder, faster, like a storm in his skull. His vision blurred, and suddenly the bridge beneath him wasn't wood, it was bone. White, endless bone, slick with blood. He staggered, nearly falling. No. Not real. Not real. He muttered, gripping the ropes tight. The child pressed a glowing hand against his chest. The vision faded. The bridge became wood again. Daniel's breath shook. Whatever this was, it wasn't just testing his body. It was testing his mind. They made it across. The ground shifted as soon as they stepped off. Another trial waited. This time, the valley floor opened, revealing a maze of moving walls. Massive stone slabs slid in and out of the earth with thunderous force, crushing anything in their path. The passage ahead shifted constantly, always closing, always opening somewhere else. The child pointed to the left. Daniel didn't hesitate. He sprinted, weaving between the crushing walls. Each one slammed down with enough force to shake the ground. Dust filled his lungs, and the sound of stone grinding against stone roared in his ears. At one turn, the walls closed too quickly. Daniel dove forward, barely clearing the gap before it sealed shut behind him. The child gasped, clinging tighter, its glow flickering like a candle in a storm. The maze went on, each step more dangerous than the last. But finally, after what felt like hours, they burst out into another clearing. Daniel collapsed too, his knees gasping for air. His hands shook violently. "What is this place?" he whispered. The child didn't answer. Instead, it looked up at him with an expression that wasn't fear. It was expectation. Before Daniel could process, the ground beneath them shook. The stones split open and something began to rise. A figure. At first, Daniel thought it was another predator. But as it climbed from the earth, he saw it was no beast. It was tall, towering over him, made of black stone with glowing eyes. Its body was carved with the same markings as the pillars, its arms long and sharp. It wasn't alive. It was a guardian. The giant moved slowly, each step echoing like thunder. Its stone eyes locked onto Daniel. Daniel backed up, plasma cutter raised. "Yeah?" Of course there's a boss fight. The Guardian lifted one massive arm and slammed it down. Daniel rolled aside just as the ground split open from the impact. Rocks flew, crashing around him. The child stood still, watching, not running, not hiding. Watching him, Daniel realized then, this was no accident. This was deliberate. Every step, every danger, every trial, it was all aimed at him. The Guardian roared, a sound like grinding mountains. Daniel knew he couldn't outrun it. He had to stand his ground. With a deep breath, he gripped the plasma cutter, feeling the heat of its blade hum in his hand. The child's glow pulsed behind him, steady, calm, like a silent promise. The Guardian struck again. Daniel charged. And so the true trial began. The Village of Shadows. The battle with the Stone Guardian had left Daniel trembling. His hands still ached from gripping the plasma cutter, his legs heavy with exhaustion. The creature had not been slain in the usual sense. It had shattered, piece by piece, until its glowing eyes dimmed and its body crumbled back into dust. But even as the last fragment sank into the ground, Daniel knew it hadn't really died. The way the earth swallowed the pieces felt intentional, almost as if the Guardian had simply finished its role. The child had said nothing, only watched him with those glassy, glowing eyes. There was no fear there, no surprise, only quiet approval. And then it led him on, past the valley of shifting stones, into the dark forest once more. Hours passed. The forest thickened, its branches clawing at Daniel's clothes like hands. The air grew colder, and the lights that had once seemed beautiful now looked menacing. Everywhere he looked, shadows moved in ways they shouldn't. Every crunch of moss under his boots echoed too loud, as if someone, or something, was walking with them. Finally, the trees thinned, the ground dipped, and Daniel found himself standing at the top of a ridge. Below, bathed in flickering blue fire, was the village. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Dozens of structures carved into stone and wood, their surfaces glowing faintly as if alive. Bridges of light arched between them. Tall spires jutted from the ground, their tips burning like torches, though no flame touched them. The entire settlement pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of a living thing. But the silence, that was what froze him. For such a large place, there was no noise, no laughter, no work, no children running, only stillness. The child tugged at his sleeve, urging him forward. Daniel followed reluctantly, his instincts screaming. As they descended the ridge and stepped into the edge of the village, he felt it, the weight of eyes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. From the shadows between the huts, figures emerged. They were tall, far taller than the child. Their bodies were lean, their skin the same faint silver glow but marked with patterns that shimmered like liquid metal. Their eyes were enormous, shining pools of light. Some carried staffs tipped with crystal. Others held long, curved blades that hummed faintly. With energy, they surrounded him in silence. Daniel's throat tightened. He raised his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon. The child stepped in front of him, holding out its tiny arms as if shielding him. The tallest figure approached. Its face was unreadable, but its eyes burned with authority. It studied Daniel for a long, crushing moment. Then it spoke. The words were alien, sharp, and heavy, yet they carried an odd rhythm, almost like a chant. Daniel couldn't understand a single syllable, but the intent was clear. A demand. "What do you want from me?" Daniel whispered, knowing they couldn't understand him either. The tall figure gestured. Two others stepped forward, seizing Daniel's arms. He struggled, but their grip was iron. The child cried out, reaching for him, but one of the guards gently pulled it aside. Daniel was dragged through the heart of the village. He caught glimpses as they moved, altars carved with glowing runes, statues of towering figures with eyes like stars, and strange fires that burned without heat. At the center of the village stood a massive stone circle, its surface engraved with thousands of markings that glowed faint blue. They threw him to his knees inside the circle. The tall figure stepped forward, raising a staff. The markings on the ground pulsed, spreading out from Daniel's knees like ripples in water. He felt it instantly, a pressure inside his head, pushing, pulling, digging into memories. Daniel gasped, clutching his skull. Images flashed in his mind, his ship, Earth, faces of people he had left behind, the forest, the guardian, the child. All of it twisted together, as though the village itself was reading his soul. The tall alien lowered the staff. The glow faded. Silence fell again. Then slowly the villagers began to whisper. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the circle. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but the tone chilled him. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't welcoming. It was debate. Judgment. Finally, the child broke free from the guard's grip and ran forward, standing beside him, its glowing hand pressed against his arm, its wide eyes fixed on the leader. The whispers stopped. The leader looked down at the child, then at Daniel. Something shifted in its eyes. Something sharp, dangerous, and yet curious. It raised the staff high. The entire village erupted into a sound Daniel had never heard before. A single booming chant, rhythmic and powerful, like the beating of war drums. The stone circle lit up again, brighter than before, until Daniel had to shield his eyes. The leader's voice thundered over the chant. Words Daniel could not understand, yet their meaning pierced him all the same. This was no welcome. This was a trial. He realized with sudden clarity that returning the child had not earned him safety. It had brought him to the true test. The circle pulsed one last time, and then the ground beneath him cracked open. The villagers stepped back as a new passage opened, spiraling into the earth, glowing faintly with blue light. The leader gestured. Daniel understood. He was being sent below. He looked at the child. It stared at him, silent but trusting, as if knowing he would go. Daniel clenched his jaw. "Yeah," he muttered. "Of course this isn't over." And then, with the weight of 100 glowing eyes upon him, he stepped into the darkness. The truth revealed. The descent felt endless. The stone stairs spiraled deep into the earth, glowing faintly with veins of light that pulsed beneath Daniel's boots. Each step carried a weight he couldn't explain, as if the ground itself resisted his presence. The air grew colder, heavier. Strange sounds echoed from the depths, low hums, like voices trapped inside the walls. The child followed quietly, its small hand gripping Daniel's arm, its glow the only warmth in the oppressive dark. Daniel glanced down at it. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" he whispered. The child didn't answer, only blinked with those enormous glassy eyes. For the first time, Daniel felt a sting of unease. The child was innocent, yes, but too calm, too certain. At last, the stairs opened into a massive chamber. Daniel froze at the threshold. The space stretched wider than any cathedral, its ceiling lost in shadow. Pillars of stone rose like giants, carved with ancient runes that shimmered faintly. At the center lay a great pool of liquid light, glowing, blue, its surface rippling as if alive. Around it stood alien figures cloaked in shadows, silent and waiting. Their eyes shone like lanterns in the dark, and above the pool, suspended in the air, hovered a massive crystal. Its surface pulsed with energy, and inside it swirled shifting images, scenes of battles, faces, landscapes Daniel didn't recognize. It was like looking into memory itself. The leader from the village stood at the edge of the pool, staff in hand. It raised its arm, and the chamber fell utterly silent. The leader spoke in that same sharp, heavy tongue, the words carrying like thunder. Daniel shook his head. "I don't understand." But then the crystal responded. A wave of light shot out, striking Daniel's chest. His breath ripped from him as visions exploded in his mind. He saw the child, Not lost, not helpless, but walking through the forest with purpose. He saw the beasts, the traps, the guardian, all watching him, all letting him pass. He saw the villagers, hidden in the shadows of the forest, their glowing eyes following his every step, every danger, every trial. None of it had been random, it had all been arranged. Daniel staggered, clutching his head. No, that's not. The vision shifted. He saw the child again, standing before the villagers. Its small voice spoke words Daniel could not understand, but the meaning was clear. It had chosen him. From the moment he found it in the forest, it had led him, tested him, judged him, and now presented him. Daniel's knees hit the stone floor. The realization crashed over him. He hadn't saved the child. The child had brought him here. The villagers began to chant. Their voices echoed like thunder, bouncing off the chamber walls. The leader pointed the staff at him, and the pool of light stirred. Figures rose from its surface, ghostly images of past warriors, alien leaders clad in armor, holding weapons that glowed like suns. Their eyes were fierce, unyielding. Daniel's chest tightened. They weren't showing him enemies, they were showing him predecessors. This wasn't just a ritual, it was a coronation. He turned to the child, desperate. "What are you doing? Why me? I'm not one of you. I'm not your leader." For the first time, the child spoke. Its voice was soft, high-pitched, but filled with strange power. The alien words twisted in the air, and Daniel understood them. Not through translation, not through magic. The meaning simply carved itself into his mind. "You are chosen." The words chilled him. Chosen for what? The leader struck the staff against the stone. The crystal above flared brighter, blinding. The ghostly warriors turned their gazes to Daniel, their eyes burning into his soul. The chamber pulsed with power, and suddenly he felt something pressing inside him. Something vast, ancient, forcing its way into his mind, his heart, his very bones. Daniel screamed. His vision blurred. He saw Earth again, his ship, the stars he had crossed. But beneath it all he saw more. Wars, death, sacrifice, the weight of 1,000 leaders before him, the endless burden of a people not his own. He collapsed, gasping as the light dimmed. When he opened his eyes, the villagers were bowing, all of them, even the leader. And the child stood before him, eyes shining brighter than ever. Not afraid, not lost, but proud. Daniel's voice shook. "No, I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to help." The child tilted its head. "Help is what a leader does." The words cut deep, simple, true, and yet terrifying. Daniel rose unsteadily, his legs weak. The villagers' chant grew again, filling the chamber with sound that shook his bones. They were not asking him, they were declaring him. He had returned the child. He had passed their trials. He had been chosen. And now, whether he wanted it or not, he carried their mark. But in the corner of the chamber, half hidden in shadow, something moved. A figure cloaked in darkness, watching silently, not bowing. Its eyes burned red, not blue. Daniel felt its gaze pierce him like a blade. Not everyone agreed, and that meant his trials were far from over. The choice. The chanting still thundered in the chamber long after the visions faded. Daniel stood unsteady, his body trembling from the flood of images forced into his mind. His chest burned, as though the ancient weight of generations pressed against his ribs, trying to carve its way into his soul. The villagers around the pool knelt, their heads bowed low. The leader raised its staff and spoke in a booming voice that echoed against the stone pillars. Though Daniel couldn't understand every word, the meaning stabbed through him. They were naming him, declaring him, claiming him as their new chieftain. Daniel staggered back, shaking his head. No, you've got this wrong. I'm not one of you. I'm not your leader." The child stepped forward, its glassy eyes locked on his. It said again softly but with unshakable conviction, "You are chosen." Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to scream at them, tell them they were insane, but the image of the visions haunted him, the ghostly warriors, the long line of leaders before him. They weren't choosing randomly. Somehow, some way, they believed he had passed their trials. But beneath the roar of voices, Daniel felt it, that other presence. The figure in the shadows, the one whose eyes glowed red instead of blue. It hadn't bowed, it hadn't accepted him, and Daniel knew that in every people, every tribe, every nation, there were always those who resisted change. The leader of the village gestured. Guards stepped forward, their weapons lowered, their glowing eyes watching him carefully, not as enemies but as protectors, as though he already belonged to them. Daniel raised his hands. "Wait, just wait. You don't know me. I'm human. I'm not part of your world. I don't understand your ways, your language, your lives. You need someone who does." The child tilted its head. "You walked the trials. You carried me. You faced the guardian. You chose to protect, not destroy. That is our way." The words hit him like stones. He hadn't thought about it. He'd just acted, protected, survived. But to them those choices had meaning far greater than he understood. The leader approached, lowering its staff until the glowing tip hovered inches from his chest. Daniel's heart pounded. Then, in the alien tongue, it spoke words so heavy, he felt them reverberate in his bones. The crystal above the pool pulsed again. This time, the meaning carved itself into his mind. Choose. Remain among your own people, or take your place among us. Daniel's breath caught. This was it. The choice. If he left, would they let him? If he stayed, what would happen to him? What would he become? He looked down at the child, the only one who had shown him trust since this nightmare began. Its glowing eyes were wide, searching his face, waiting. But before he could speak, the air shifted. The red-eyed figure stepped forward at last, its cloak dragged across the stone, its movements slow but heavy with menace. The villagers fell silent. Even the leader's staff dimmed. The figure stopped at the edge of the pool. Its voice rang out sharper, darker than the others. Though Daniel couldn't understand the words, the tone was unmistakable. Defiance. Rejection. The crowd rippled with whispers. The leader responded, voice strong but strained. The two clashed in words Daniel couldn't follow, their tones rising like storm winds. Then, the red-eyed figure pointed, straight at Daniel. The whispers turned into a storm. Some villagers nodded in agreement, their glowing eyes shifting darker, harder. Others shook their heads. The division split the chamber like a crack in stone. The child gasped softly. Its glow flickered nervously. Daniel understood enough. Not everyone wanted him as their leader. And one of them, a powerful one, would fight to stop it. The red-eyed figure spread its arms wide. Its cloak fell away, revealing a body marked not with silver patterns, but with jagged black scars that glowed faint crimson. Its eyes burned, with fire, its presence radiating hatred. Daniel's gut twisted. He didn't need translation. This one had been waiting for a chance to seize power. And now he was that chance. The leader raised its staff in defiance. But the challenger was already moving. With a guttural roar, it slammed its blade into the stone floor, sending cracks racing through the chamber. The villagers cried out, scattering. Back. The pool of light rippled violently, the crystal above it flaring like a lightning storm. The child grabbed Daniel's hand. Decide. Daniel's chest burned. This wasn't just about him anymore. If he walked away, the challenger would seize power, and the child's people would fall under darkness. If he stayed, he'd be dragged into their struggle, bound to a role he never wanted. The red-eyed warrior's voice boomed again, challenging him directly. Daniel didn't know the words, but the meaning carved itself into his mind as the crystal pulsed once more. Prove you are leader or die here." The villagers waited, silent, divided. The leader looked at him with fierce eyes, as if daring him to rise. The child held his hand tight, trembling but trusting. Daniel's fists clenched. He wanted to run, to scream, to wake from this nightmare. But deep inside, something else stirred. A memory of why he had come to this planet at all. To explore, to protect, to survive. He hadn't chosen to lead. But maybe leadership had chosen him. He raised the plasma cutter. The glow of its blade lit the chamber. His voice shook, but it was steady enough. "Fine," he said. "I'll fight." The villagers gasped. The leader's staff blazed with light. The challenger's crimson eyes burned hotter. The trial was no longer about survival. It was about destiny, and Daniel was walking straight into it. The ending. The chamber shook with the roar of the challenger's blade striking stone. Cracks spread like veins of fire beneath Daniel's boots. The crimson glow from the warrior's eyes filled the space with menace, a heat that pressed against Daniel's skin. The villagers had fallen back, forming a wide circle. Their glowing eyes flickered with fear, some silver, some crimson, split between loyalties. The leader stood tall at the far edge, staff blazing with blue fire, but even it did not interfere. This was no longer the tribe's fight. This was Daniel's. The child clung to him, its trembling hand pressed against his arm. Its glassy eyes searched his face, pleading and trusting at once. Daniel's mouth was dry, his hands slick with sweat as he gripped the plasma cutter. He had fought beasts, faced traps, battled stone guardians. But this was different. This wasn't survival. This was a duel for the soul of an entire people. The challenger pointed its crimson blade at him, voice booming. The crystal above flared. The meaning cut straight into Daniel's mind. "Fight. Prove you are worthy or fall as an outsider." Daniel's heart pounded. His mind screamed that this wasn't his fight. He wasn't their leader. He wasn't chosen. He was just a human explorer who had stumbled into something he didn't understand. But then he looked at the child. The one who had trusted him, guided him, stood by him through every trial. And deep in his chest, the doubt gave way to something else. Not destiny, not prophecy, choice. He stepped forward. "All right," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "Let's finish this." The duel began. The challenger charged, moving faster than anything Daniel had ever seen. Its blade cut arcs of red fire through the air. Daniel barely dodged, the plasma cutter sparking as he deflected a blow. The impact nearly tore the weapon from his hand. The force behind each strike was inhuman, crushing. Daniel stumbled, rolled, barely avoiding death again and again. The villagers gasped with each near miss, their voices rising in a storm of whispers. The child cried out, reaching toward him. Its glow flickered brighter, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Daniel fought desperately, his arms screaming with strain, his lungs burning. Each clash of weapons sent sparks across the chamber. The challenger's blade was longer, stronger. Daniel's plasma cutter felt pitiful against it. But Daniel had something the challenger didn't: grit. Every time he was knocked down, he forced himself back up. Every time the blade nearly cut him apart, he twisted away with stubborn determination, and slowly he began to see it. The challenger's strikes were furious but predictable. Rage guided its movements, power without patience. Daniel had seen it before in soldiers who fought with anger rather than discipline. He waited, watched, dodged again. Then, when the challenger lunged with a killing blow, Daniel rolled beneath it and slashed upward. His plasma cutter burned across the warrior's side, leaving a deep, glowing scar. The challenger roared, stumbling back. The villagers gasped. Daniel stood, chest heaving. His arms shook, his legs weak. But he held the yawa cutter steady. "I don't need to be one of you to know this," he said, his voice loud, steady. "A leader doesn't rule with fear. A leader protects." The child stepped forward, its small voice carrying through the chamber. "He speaks true." The Yao word silenced the crowd. The challenger snarled, crimson eyes blazing. It lifted its blade for one final strike. Daniel braced himself. This would be the end. But the child raised its hand. Its glow erupted brighter than ever before, filling the chamber with silver light. The crystal above flared in response, blasting the chamber with energy. The challenger froze mid-strike, its blade trembling. The villagers fell to their knees as the crystal poured its light into Daniel and the child together. Visions flooded his mind again, not of warriors or leaders, but of the child itself, its birth, its place as heir to the tribe. And the truth, this test had never been only for him. It was for both of them. The next leader would not rise alone, but with a protector, a guide. Daniel understood. He wasn't meant to be their chieftain. He was meant to prove he could stand beside the one who would. The light dimmed. The challenger collapsed to the floor, its crimson blade extinguished. It lay broken, not dead, but stripped of power. The villagers rose slowly, their glowing eyes turned not to the challenger, but to Daniel and the child. The leader stepped forward, lowering its staff, and bowed deeply. One by one, the villagers followed, until the entire chamber was bent before them. Daniel stood frozen, the plasma cutter hanging limp at his side. He looked down at the child. It smiled faintly, glowing with calm strength. "You returned me," it whispered. "You faced the trials. You chose to fight, not for power, but for us. That is what a leader needs." Daniel knelt, placing a hand on its shoulder. "This is your world, not mine. Lead them. I'll stand by you." The child's glow brightened, spreading through the chamber like dawn. The villagers rose, chanting not in anger, not in judgment, but in reverence. The division was gone. The choice had been made. Daniel looked up at the crystal one last time. Its swirling light calmed, reflecting not just alien memories but his own. Earth, stars, humanity. He realized then that his name, his story, would live here forever. Not as an outsider, but as the human who proved himself worthy in a trial, not his own. When he finally stepped out of the chamber, the alien night sky stretched above, rivers of starlight flowing endlessly. The child walked at his side, small but steady, glowing with the quiet fire of a future leader. Daniel smiled faintly. He had come to this planet by accident. He had only meant to survive, but he had left behind something greater. A legend. The end.